Hi everyone! Right, so The Adventures of Pinocchio was released in 1996, directed by Steve Barron and distributed by Universal Studios, created by Jim Henson Productions, or Jim Henson Creatures. Yep, so I remember going to see this movie in 1996, and I remember being very entertained and enjoyed it a lot. But boy, did this have some scary scenes in it. Um, it didn't do particularly well critically. It wasn't very well critically acclaimed at the time, and I don't think it brought in all that much at the box office. But over the years, it has gained a cult following, and for me, it's just a nostalgic family film. So, the film stars Martin Landau and Jonathan Taylor Thomas as Geppetto the Woodcarver and Pinocchio. Um, so, yes, what I'm basically just want to talk about is what I find interesting about the movie. Um, Basically, yes, it is the story of Pinocchio, the classic story, but the changes from it. I was particularly interested in the changes from the Disney movie because that's how I was introduced to the character and to the story originally. However, in this version, the key difference most people realise is that there's no blue fairy. The creation of Pinocchio is creation of Pinocchio basically is that he was carved from a log that fell from a tree that Geppetto carved a heart into for his secret love for his sister-in-law, and before the log fell from the tree, a bolt of magic lightning struck the heart, giving it magic powers. And when Geppetto builds Pinocchio from the log, the magic in the heart brings him to life. And that's the difference everyone points out when talking about this film. Some other differences are that the Monstro equivalent, the whale, is actually the villain, the human villain of the film turned into a whale, not like in the Disney film where Stromboli is the first proper villain of the film, and then Geppetto and Pinocchio are swallowed by Monstro the whale. The antagonist in this film is a puppeteer like Stromboli, a character called Lorenzini, played by Udo Kier, and we have his henchmen, a duo called Volpe and Feline, who are basically the equivalent of Honest John and the cat from the Disney film. It has similarities to the Disney movie, as well as differences. So the story is, after Pinocchio is brought to life, he has to learn the difference between right and wrong in order to become a real boy, which of course is his goal. Geppetto's character is quite different, I find, from the Disney version, because in the Disney version, Geppetto really wanted a real boy, whilst in this version, Geppetto's always been a loner and openly says that it'd be better for him to make puppets than noisy little boys, because he's emotionally attached to his puppets because he's lonely and kept this secret love to himself. He's never told his sister-in-law how she feels. Of course, he feels like he missed out because she married his late brother. Now I have to talk about the effects in this movie. Most of the effects in this movie look really good, and that is due to the work of the Jim Henson Workshop. I mean, the puppet of Pinocchio, you can clearly, I think it's made of rubber, you can see, but it does look like actual proper pine wood. And just seeing how the puppet moves, how the mouth moves, how the limbs move, and how he, how with the facial expressions he can to a degree make fairly realistic facial expressions in this. And then the scene in the classroom where Pinocchio is telling the lies is really funny. Clearly some early CGI in when his nose actually grows, but then there's the scene where Pinocchio is moving his head round, and and clearly what's a prop is the long nose knocking things over and knocking other kids. And then the scene where Pinocchio sneezes that massive cloud of chalk dust into the professor's face is really funny. I'll tell you, the greatest example of the special effects in this movie, other than the puppet, is the scene where the boys, all the disobedient boys, are at the amusement park, and they're on this roller coaster that goes through this waterfall of magic water. So as they're on the roller coaster, they'll drink it, then they'll turn into donkeys. And that scene where they transform into donkeys is so scary. I actually remember having to rewind past the scene as a kid when I used to watch it on video. Basically how it happens is, 1 minute they're back in a tunnel with strobe lighting kind of thing, and what happens is you see the human face on the boys, it fades out for a second, and then you sort of see the jackass face basically takes shape, and then it fades out again, and then the transformation is complete. I have to say that was quite scary. And there's also the scene where the puppeteer Lorenzini gets knocked into the magic water by Lampwick as a donkey, and he actually then becomes the sea monster, or the whale, the equivalent of Monstro. And that scene's quite nightmare-inducing as well. Like, you can see him knocked in the water, and then while he's underwater, one of his sides of his face starts to change shape into a monstrous face, and then he gets out the water, and then before he's about to go and jump into the sea, his face kind of stretches as he's turning into a whale. And then the final example. And then basically how the movie's climax basically goes. Pinocchio goes out to sea to find Geppetto, because Geppetto found Pinocchio's hat, thinking he found Pinocchio's hat on a beach, and went out to sea to look for him in a boat. So Pinocchio goes out after him, and Pinocchio's swallowed. Quite another scary scene. He's swallowed by the sea monster, and then while he's there, him and Pepe the cricket. I'll talk more about Pepe in a second. Basically, they find Geppetto, and then to get out, what Pinocchio has to do is Pinocchio tells lies to make his nose grow, and then his nose snaps off and gets stuck in the whale's throat. So the whale chokes them out, and then chokes to death on the nose. So it's pretty scary. And the inside of the whale looks really good when they're when they're inside of the whale and moving their way up the throat. That looks bloody realistic. It really does. And then finally, Geppetto and Pinocchio both realise that they went wrong. Geppetto says to Pinocchio that no matter what he's made of, to him he's a real boy. And then they say to each other that they love each other. And then Pinocchio cries his first real tear that falls onto the wooden heart. And that's where the miracle happens, and he becomes a real boy. And also, Jonathan Taylor Thomas also physically played Pinocchio as a real boy at the end of the movie, as well. So yeah, I was going to talk. The one problem, a lot of the problem people tend to have with the film, I think, is the cricket, Pepe the cricket. That's what he's called in this version. The cricket is voiced by Just gonna have to double check something. I knew I'd forget something, but David Doyle, who was the voice best known for being the voice of the grandpa in Rugrats. Now, but I am aware that for the original trailer, he was voiced by a different actor, but for some reason they decided to make the change. Other supporting cast, Volpe and Felinay, the Minions duo, they're played by Bebe Neuwirth and Rob Schneider. So it's good to see Rob Schneider in a more comedic role. Marcello Magni and Dawn French have cameos as the baker, as the baker husband and wife. You have John Sessions as the professor in the classroom. There are a lot of cameos in this movie. Okay, so basically, and what I'll finally just talk about is the music in the film. The score of the film is really fitting. It's really calm and goes with the tone of the movie. Another thing that's remembered more, I think, than the film is a song, "What Are We Made Of" by Brian May, that in the movie is featured in the puppet show scene when Pinocchio does his first act of redemption, saving Geppetto's puppets from burning. And that song is sung, but then there's also the version performed by Brian May as well. And that's a real sort of 90s pop song. But because I know that the original idea for this came about in the 80s, and the idea was just pitched from studio to studio until I think Universal eventually settled on it and made the film. But that's one thing that other reviewers have said, is that it really does have a mix of 80s presence and 90s presence, because they kept many of the original ideas in, and I think the original idea was to have a more darker tone. I mean, to be fair, some scenes in this are pretty dark as it is, but I think Jim Henson wanted to go with the idea of having a darker tone to the film. And it does have that very 80s feel to it, but also that's mixed in, since this is by the time this was made, it was the late 90s, so you have 90s pop songs included, and 90s humour. The only big issue that I really have with it is, I think the voice, David Doyle, for Pepe the Cricket, the voice is good, but the CGI really is very bad. He's like, the fully CGI character in the film. And it wouldn't be as bad if they didn't show him up close so much. Like, he's shown constantly to be standing on Pinocchio's nose when he talks to him. And of course, you can see it through Pinocchio's eyes. And so he's basically looking right into the camera. And that's quite off-putting. I think they should have done the cricket a bit differently. Like, just not do so many close-up shots of that particular character, because it really doesn't fit. And I think I can see why that's off-putting for certain people. But anyways, for me, this is nostalgic. It's not exactly a childhood favourite, but it is one that I watched several times as a kid, and I've just watched it now before doing this review. So as I say, if you like the story of Pinocchio and you haven't seen this, I'd recommend that you give this a watch. And if you're a fan of Martin Landau, then you might like it, and you probably should watch it. Or also, if you want just a nice family film to sit down and watch, one that doesn't drag on, and one that doesn't drag on and is more or less entertaining from beginning to end, in different ways, this is probably a good choice. If you're not a big fan of, straight fantasy films, then I wouldn't recommend watching this, because you'd probably end up feeling a bit disheartened. But nonetheless, for me, it's a nostalgic childhood memory. I hope you've enjoyed the review. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.